Hi, my name is Robert Andrews. I'm the founder and director of the Institute of Sports Performance in Houston, Texas. And my business, we're mental training experts, but my primary area of focus is helping injured athletes overcome the mental and emotional or psychological impact of serious sports-related injuries. So today I'm going to be telling you a bit of how I got to where I am and the theories and the concepts and protocols behind what I do with injuries. I was a three-sport athlete in high school, and my sophomore year of high school, I got hit on what's now an illegal block and tore 3 ligaments in my knee, the medial meniscus, ruptured the fluid capsule, and strained the patellar tendon. And a few years ago, I got inducted into my high school's athletic hall of honor, and my old coach got up to introduce me and said that the doctors told him that I shouldn't play sports anymore. And that was the first time I've ever heard of that. And so it was remarkable to me that I was able to come back from that and play at a high level and play in college and have a high level of success. But in the background, there was always this fear of getting hurt again. And so because of that, I suffered other injuries. I went up to dunk a basketball one time, and a guy undercut me, and I landed on my left knee and tore my meniscus. I suffered a broken arm, 2 separated shoulders, several concussions. So I've had a lot of physical injuries, and through that experience, I've seen that there's certainly a mental and emotional component, psychological component to injuries. And so in graduate school, I did a lot of research on PTSD and trauma resolution. In fact, that's what my research thesis was PTSD. And I did traditional psychotherapy for 10 years or so, and kind of started losing my interest and passion in that. One day I had this epiphany that all the trauma processes and protocols that I had learned and utilized would help injured athletes. So I talked to a couple of people I know in sports, high school athletic directors and other folks, and I started going out and doing parent talks. And within no time at all, I was seeing my practice just completely shifted over to sports. And that started with injuries that wove into performance issues in teams. And I've been to 3 Olympic Games and worked with Olympic athletes in performance, but my real passion is helping injured athletes. So let's dive in here. And so my goal is to help you understand more about what goes on with an injury on a mental and emotional level with brain functioning and what happens to personality and character. One of the things that I've noticed, especially back when I was injured, and thank God my coaches handled this very, very well, but I knew of other athletes from other schools and other sports in my school where there was this stigma associated with an injured athlete. And I was seeing things like athletes were seen as weak, not having what it takes, not being a good team player. Many were shunned and ignored. When I was in college, I separated my left shoulder in the spring game, and I remember walking across campus the next week with my arm in a sling, and 2 of my coaches walked by and didn't even say anything to me. And that memory is very vividly etched in my mind about how hurtful that was. And I actually felt like something was wrong with me, that because I was injured and my coaches wouldn't even acknowledge me when they passed me 5 feet away. And I can still see that image in my mind. We're going to talk about the power of holographic imprints or imagery a little bit later. I've worked with some athletes on college, professional teams, even high school teams, where they're kind of shunned or put away from the other athletes. They have to be in what's called the pit with some programs where they don't even have any connection to the team. They have to do some kind of demeaning, rigorous physical exercise. It's almost as if they're being punished for being injured. They're an outcast. I've talked to players who can't go to team meetings. They can't be on the sidelines at games. They have tears in their eyes coming down. There's such a disconnection from their team. And back in my day, they were labeled injured athletes. Many times were often as referred to as head cases. I think that still goes on. People think that because an athlete is afraid of getting hurt again, or can't throw a curve ball, or has the yips around throwing a ball from pitcher's mound over to first base, or a catcher throwing a ball back to the pitcher, that there's something wrong with them, that there's a head case. And one spring, I worked with 13 baseball catchers who couldn't throw the ball back to the pitcher, and it had to do with automobile accidents, collisions at home plate, collisions in the outfield when they were playing another position, issues at home. So these are usually stress related. So we've seen a lot of serious things that revolve around the injury and the impact that it has on the athlete. I know for me, and I can speak for many, many athletes that I've worked with, they refer to being on the sidelines watching as the loneliest place in the world, that sense of disconnection, loss of identity, not being part of a team, not being part of a great team victory. Or for me, it was seeing that I could have made plays that maybe were being missed when we lost in the state semifinals when I was in high school. Not anything against guys on my team. I had an amazing team, but I just felt like I could have contributed, and it was a very sad and frustrating feeling to not be able to contribute. So I oftentimes hear that it's just so lonely to be on the sidelines or at home on TV watching your team play where you're rehabbing from a serious injury. Injuries we treat, lots of ACL injuries. I have good relationships with doctors here in Houston and their physical therapists. They're just a wonderful relationship that we have. Tommy John surgeries, broken arms, legs, ankles, head injuries from collisions, baseball, softball, soccer. I've worked with players that have had head injuries and concussions from headers, collisions in the outfield, shoulder injuries. Like I said, concussions we see in a lot of sports, especially sports like football and soccer, but I also see them in basketball and other sports. And then overuse injuries. And I do a lot of work with gymnasts, and we see a lot of gymnasts who have experienced really bad falls where they get disoriented in the air and land on their head. There's a lot of lower leg injuries in gymnastics and arm injuries and wrist injuries. So all those injuries, though physical in nature, have a psychological component. So what I usually hear when a coach, a parent, an athlete contacts me is I usually hear things like, and if you'll notice, these aren't physical symptoms that we're seeing on the most part. They say that there's a change, that my athlete has become somewhat shut down or quiet. They've turned inward. They see changes in their social life or patterns in their personal life. There's a loss of drive and passion. In many instances, they see increased anxiety. And you physical therapists out there will see that they're favoring that injured area. There's certain exercises or drills they won't do. There's hesitation in the rehab process, avoidance on returning to training. I've had athletes do just fine until their doctor said you're cleared, and then boom, they want to get in to see me. Anger, depression. So we see all kinds of changes in personality, mood, emotion. And those are warning signs to look for, that maybe you or your athlete is really suffering from the psychological impact of the injury that they've suffered. When an athlete is injured, there's intense pain, obviously. I certainly remember what it's like when I had my injuries over the years. But there's surges of intense emotions that move through the body. There's surges of chemicals like adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine that surge into the system. There's intrusive thoughts and images. The brain takes what are called holographic images. Every injured athlete, if you ask them, when you think about the worst part of your injury, an image, you'll see them look for it, and then an image will pop into their mind. And I'm going to talk about that more in just a little bit, but those images are loaded with information. There's loss of playing time, loss of a season, their position, connection to a team, identity. I worked with athletes that have just wept over career-ending injuries. There's the surgical process, and there's usually a lot of fear and anxiety and confusion around that. Some are really angry when they find out that they have to have surgery. Then they have to face the rehab process. And this is particularly devastating with ACL injuries, where they go out and injure the ACL again, or in many instances tear the other ACL. They've spent 8-9 months rehabbing, and to gear up and have to do that all over again. And oftentimes when I work with an athlete who's had 2 or 3 ACL injuries, I'll say, when you think about the worst part, they say that they're sitting there getting examined thinking, I know what this is, and I've got to go through that rehab process all over again. It's just devastating to them. They have to learn to trust their body again. And I know sometimes it's just firing your quad for 5 seconds, stepping over a cone, little exercises that progressively expand outward. Sleep disturbances, hypervigilance, serious changes in personality that we see, many times quiet, withdrawn. I had one athlete, was a high school volleyball player that was a great singer. Interestingly enough, she quit singing And that was really concerning to her parents. And through the course of our work together, I think I saw her 3 times. She started playing volleyball again. She started landing on one leg. She was afraid to land on one leg. She was always had to land on 2 legs. She starts landing on one leg, killing the ball well. But her parents called me one day and said, we're happy with all that, but what we're the most happy about is that she came downstairs this morning and she was singing again. And that actually put tears in my eyes when I heard that. And then last, fear of re-injury. That's oftentimes an athlete's biggest fear, is that this is going to go out and I'm going to go out and this could all happen again. And that's critical, because if there is a fear of re-injury there, then there could be favoritism, and that can put more stress on the other joint. I've had athletes stand on a scale, 1 foot on one scale and 1 foot on the other, and if they weighed 200 pounds, this is an estimate, let's say they had 105 pounds on the uninjured leg and 95 on the other. Well, there's 10 pounds of difference there, and if you go out and run and cut and jump and slide and all that, over time that physics adds up. And so many times, I know for me, my fear of re-injury certainly cost me other injuries. And so my goal with the athlete is, when they think about playing again and we project things into the future, they're like, I'm great. And then when they go to physical therapy, we see an acceleration in the physical therapy process. And when they start playing again, we want absolute confidence. And so that's my goal with them, is for those images to dissolve and move away, their upset levels to drop, confidence just soar through the roof. And most of the time, a very, very high percentage of the time, I'm very successful with that. I treat sports injuries like a trauma. Early in my career, I did a lot of work with serious and near fatal automobile accidents, domestic violence. I had a guy that fell off a mountain and broke his leg and landed on a ledge just a couple of feet, 3,000 foot drop off. He lay there for 9 hours. I worked with a woman who almost died giving birth to her daughter. So I have a very strong background in trauma. And like I said, back in 2006, 2007, I just had this aha that model will work with injured athletes. So I treat a serious injury like an ACL, a Tommy John, injuries like that, just like a car wreck or a serious trauma. And I'll explain more now about how that works. If you look at brain functioning, when an athlete is just out competing and doing very, very well, there's certain parts of the brain that are firing to ensure balance and skill repetition and execution and spatial awareness and drive and passion and all that. But when an athlete goes through a serious injury, it activates a part of the brain called the limbic system. And the limbic system manages high stress and traumatic experiences. And there is one part of the brain, it's little tiny part, there's actually 2 segments of it that sit just behind the eyes. It's called the amygdala, and the amygdala regulates emotion. Everything that we experience runs through the amygdala. It filters through the amygdala, and the amygdala says, is what I'm experiencing safe or is it threatening? If it says it's safe, it sends an all clear signal. Everything calms down. If it says it's threatening, it fires up another part of the brain that monitors concepts around time. When have we seen this before? And another part of the brain that monitors certain types of memory. What was it? So if it's seen it before, if an athlete suffered that injury before, it knows exactly what's going on. So it draws from that memory and that experience to help cope with that. If it hasn't seen that type of experience, that type of injury before, it starts grabbing information and taking these snapshot holographic images. And then it loads those images up with pain and emotion and sensation and sound and color, intensity, consequence. I've had athletes know what the smell of the grass, remember the smell of the grass when they were laying on the ground. I had a gymnast that was coming down at the high bar at World Championships and getting ready to hit the high bar. He ended up chipping his tooth and had a mild concussion. But he remembered the brightness of the lights and the name of the mat company coming up towards him. And so it captures that information, and that's what fear of re-injury is all about. That fear of re-injury means that the athlete goes out and executes some kind of a skill or an exercise or plants or cuts or jumps, and it fires the limbic system, and the limbic system calls up that information and says, see, we know what's happened here before, and that's when they go into protection mode. You know, they call it alligator arms, or they wince. I know for me, one of the reasons I separated my shoulder in college was I went to catch a pass I felt the safety coming, and I went into defensive mode unconsciously, and he hit me right here and separated my shoulder. Well, I had separated it in high school, and I know that's why I got hurt again. And I remember the trainer one day came up to me and he said, "You need to quit worrying about hurting your knee again." And I'd kind of bowed up, like I'm okay, but I saw that he recognized that I had this tremendous fear of re-injury because of something that happened back when I was in high school. So I had some work to do. And actually, I was able to do that work in my training sessions through the processes that I'm going to be talking about here in just a few minutes. So brain functioning, trauma, it's critical components of what we do. There's 3 steps to treatment. The first step, and this doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's a game changer. If I can see an athlete before they have surgery, they go through the surgical process calm. So many of them have rational and irrational fears. They have horrible images in their mind of their leg being filleted open. What if I'm laying there and they didn't completely knock me out and I know everything that's going on and I can hear everything that's going on and they don't know that? What if they operate on the wrong knee? What if they cut the wrong ligaments or tendons? So all these irrational fears, fear of needles, fear of blood, fear of anesthesia. And so we teach the brain how to process all that fear and anxiety before they ever go into surgery. A few years ago, I worked with the University of Houston women's soccer team, and they had 6 ACLs in 13 days. And I was able to see 3 of those girls before surgery, and they did great. They sailed through the surgery process and the rehab process. They returned to play and did remarkably well with Dr. Lowe's great work and a wonderful physical therapist. And then I saw 2 of them after surgery, and they had a bit more work to do, but still did fine. The last one I never saw until she was cleared to play, and then she got out there and freaked out and said, "Now I want to go see him." And we had a lot of work to do. So I kind of had a mini experiment that we were able to work with that way. So the first step is pre-surgery treatment if possible. And if not, it's an evaluation. And that means I have some very specific injury questionnaires that I send out, and Dr. Lowe uses these. We created these for a research project we started about 5 years ago on the psychological impact of ACL injuries. So it's that, and then I have another worksheet that I have them complete. And the purpose behind these worksheets is to monitor progress and see where they are coming into this experience, but also I ask them to do it the night before they see me because it stirs the limbic up somewhat. And when they come into my office, their nerve endings are kind of raw. Their brain's kind of activated, like what's going on here. And I look through their paperwork and usually like with an ACL injury, it's questions like, this has affected my self-confidence severely, not at all. I feel anxious, upset. My confidence is poor to great, and usually the numbers are always really, really high, like a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of frustration, a lot of fear of re-injury. And so the scores are always to the right side of the page. Part of the evaluation process also is looking at the representative images that represent the worst part of the experience for them. And I might see, with ACLs, it's usually the pop. And you PTs are kind of probably nodding your head. They always remember the pop, planning and feeling the pop. The buckling of the knee can be another image. The doctor looking at their knee and mouthing to the trainer ACL. Being carried off the field, teammates looking at them. Being on the sidelines, being iced, their parents' faces, the doctor calling them and telling them they have a torn ACL or a broken bone and need surgery, being at home, being on the sidelines. Those are all typical images that we see. And then we take a deep dive into each one of these images. What's the negative or fear-based thought that goes along with that image? What's the emotion that goes along with that? Where do you feel that in your body? I feel it in my chest. I feel it in my stomach. I feel it in my knee. Sometimes athletes say, I don't feel anything in my body. And that's always kind of a red flag for me because that tells me that the trauma that they've been through has disconnected their brain from their body's ability to really live in their body and feel. And so that means we have some work to do to kind of get them feeling again and getting comfortable being back in their body. So step 1 is pre-surgery treatment if possible, and this very detailed, in-depth evaluation. And then from that, I know exactly what work we need to do to address the trauma that they've been through. Step 2 is to treat the specific issues related to the injury. What happened? What are the consequences of that? The loss, present issues. Well, I'm in rehab and I'm afraid to do this, or I'm playing some, but I just don't feel right. We process that, teach the brain how to calm down, and then we project them into the future. See yourself down the road, and how do you see yourself running and catching that same pass where you got hit, or going into that 50-50 ball as a soccer player, or landing on that ankle as a gymnast. And if there's hesitation around that, then we use the techniques I'm getting ready to discuss to teach the brain and the nervous system and the body how to process that information. So through those 3 treatment processes, my goal is to get those upset scores on the other side of the page down to 0 or not at all, and the images in their mind to fade away, because once the brain processes all the associated information in that image, it doesn't need the image anymore, and that image will literally fade away. And I'll ask the athlete to check in, where's that image now? How does that image appear to you? And I'll see them looking for it. Well, it's there, but it's really, really faint. I can't even hardly see it again. My image around my injury was in front of me for 22 years. 22 years. And now I can't even see it anymore when I look for it. So it's very, very powerful work. Protocols I use is a protocol called eidetic imagery that I learned many years ago. Teaches the brain to re-script the process, the image and the experience in slow motion 6 to 8 times a day for 3 days, and that begins to give the brain a new target to focus on. They've been stuck on this old scary negative image for a long time. Then we have them re-script the play in very slow motion with a positive outcome where they don't get hurt. And then they reinforce that for 3 days and 3 nights. And then we do a process called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I've used this protocol for over 24 years. I've done training in remote protocols for this now, so I'm doing lots of telehealth sessions right now. And I find that the one of the 3 remote protocols for EMDR are very helpful with injuries, mental blocks, trauma that I'm using that way. And so that combination of eidetic imagery and EMDR has proved to be just incredibly helpful to athletes that have suffered serious injuries. So the last thing, what I see that they're learning from this experience is how can I grow? How can I become a better person? The athlete that comes into the injury is not the same athlete that goes through the rehab process and my process and the process of surgery. They come out wiser, smarter, more mature, greater skill development, resilience, faith. I see that sometimes. They acquire and use skills, traits, and tools that they may never have had to access in their life had they not been injured. Patience is a huge part of the rehab process, so they learn to be patient. They learn to see the big picture, that I have to learn to crawl before I can walk, and then I have to walk before I can get on my feet again, and then eventually I can run again. So it's a big picture process. And most importantly, what I see is it helps them build character and develop resilience, which, with what we're facing now with this pandemic, resilience and character are critical. And interestingly enough, through this, I'm seeing a lot of injured athletes right now. And I think the compounding of isolation, disconnection from friends and school and sports with the virus, and going through an injury rehab process is too much for many athletes. So I'm seeing a lot of injured athletes right now, which is fine with me because, like I said earlier, I love doing that work. So that's it in a nutshell. Open to questions, feedback. My contact information will be on the screen. If you have any questions or concerns, anything, email me, call me. I'll be happy to answer your questions. Like I said, I have a lot of passion for this work. The combination of great surgery, great physical therapy, and great psychology is what I call the new way back. You know, that's what the future, the present and the future of coming back from a serious sports-related injury. So thanks for having me. Always great to work with you guys, and thank you very much.